My wife and I talked a lot about the subject. She said that based on her history with her stepmother, it really was a good thing she didn't have children. But before we had ours, my wife had always wanted to be a mother and was terrified about the possibility of not being able to. That fear got worse around the time Smil had the hysterectomy. My wife told me her stepmother was agonized when it happened, and even though she agreed with me, she felt it might be best to apologize. Another thing that led me to make that decision was my mother. Before my brother and I were born, my parents had a stillborn daughter. They didn't talk about her much, so I didn't even think of it at the time, but my brother brought it up a few days ago. I couldn't stop thinking about her. As a parent, I can't even begin to imagine how my mother felt. I would never mention anything related to that out of anger, no matter how wrong my mother was. In the end, my wife and I agreed that while I should apologize, we absolutely can't budge on cutting her stepmother off. We can't forgive what she did. It took us hours to convince our daughter to eat anything, not just meat. Even after that, she refused to eat meat for a few days because she didn't want to be evil. Our son wasn't as shaken, but he still had trouble sleeping for a few nights. My wife and I sat them down and had a long conversation about it. We answered every question they had as well as we could. Thankfully, we were able to reassure both our kids that eating meat wouldn't make them bad people. They are still a little distraught, but they are doing much better and eating normally again. Our main concern will always be their health and happiness. Smil compromised both, so we had no doubts about cutting her from our lives. We called Phil and Smil this weekend. I apologized for what I said to Smil, but told her we were still cutting her off. As expected, she didn't take it well. She started going off about how she was trying to help our children, and we were terrible parents for depriving them of that care. I'm pretty sure she was crying. She said that it was awful that such cruel, ungrateful people could raise kids and not her, and we shouldn't allow our children to take part in something that caused so much unnecessary suffering. After about a minute of that, Phil managed to get Smil to stop and hang up the phone. My wife later spoke with her father separately. Phil apologized again for falling asleep. He said he understood why we were upset but promised he would never do anything like that again. We decided to forgive him, but we won't leave the kids in his care again, and he will only be allowed to see them without his wife. We have options besides our usual babysitter. Phil agreed. He invited us for a family dinner at a steakhouse my wife loved as a kid. He hasn't been there since Smil became a vegetarian. We're going this Friday. I definitely have my regrets, but I'm satisfied with how things turned out. More than anything, I'm glad my children are all right. Watching my daughter refuse to eat was terrifying, and I will never forgive Smil for scaring her and her brother like that. But they're getting better every day, and I think things are going to be okay.